Everyone, today is Wednesday. I don't remember the date, but it's Wednesday, and I'm gone in South Carolina. So this is the first video you're going to watch over Latin America. You're also going to watch a video on Thursday and Friday. So as I go through here, it's just like doing notes in class. I'll highlight, the most important stuff, tell you things you need to take note of, and all of that. Remember, you're not going to have a test over this unit. You will have a quiz next week when I return, as well as your midterm. So about a quarter of the midterm will cover the information in this unit. All right, so today we're going to look at Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central America. And I'm going to leave the presentation in this mode because I'm recording my screen, and if I expand it, it looks different on my screen and you can't really see the slides. So I'm going to keep it like this. All right, so the history of Mexico. Well, if we can go back thousands of years to the ancient civilizations such as the Toltecs, Olmecs, Zapotecs, and all of that, the people that were there before the Aztecs. But in general, just really what you need to know is that the Europeans arrived in 1519. Is when the Spanish arrived and they found the Aztecs. Of course, they were looking for the city of gold. They were not expecting to find a thriving civilization like they found in Mexico. In fact, the city, Tenochtitlan, which I can't say it right, but that city had a bigger population than any European city at that time. And so it was a huge shock to the Spanish to see such a huge sprawling city there in the valley where Mexico City is today. So the Spanish, even though they were few in number, were able to conquer the Aztecs, and you need to know why. I mean, first off, it's that last bullet point right there. They were mainly wiped out by disease, of course, smallpox, because the natives hadn't been exposed to European or African diseases before, and so their immune system couldn't handle it. And then, of course, the Spanish had superior weapons, such as guns and not arrows, and also they had the help of other tribes, because there was hundreds of other tribes in the area. It wasn't just the Aztecs. These other tribes hated the Aztecs, and so they actually teamed up with the Spanish to fight the Aztecs. And of course, the biggest reason for that was human sacrifice. The Aztecs were taking these other groups of people and sacrificing them to their gods because they believed that it took human blood to power the sun across the sky. And so there's always this kind of continual human sacrifice going on. So that's early Mexican history. So Spanish take over, Spanish control Mexico in that region for quite a while. And then we'll fast forward up really to the 1800s as far as Mexico goes. So Mexican history, really what I want you to get out of this is why they're so unstable today. Why does Mexico have so many issues today? And it all comes back to their history and the unstable governments and leaders they've had over time. And so if you go back to the 1800s, you already know about Santa Anna, so we'll skip him. And then we'll go on to Benito Juarez. Benito Juarez really grew up as a peasant. He eventually became a lawyer. He's pictured there on the far right, the color photo there. And he was the first Mexican president that was a mestizo, which is a mixture of Native American and European blood. So he was more Native American. He wasn't Spanish, really. And so he was a man of the people. Almost think of him as you could kind of think of him as like a Robin Hood. He wanted to take away from the rich, take away their land, their huge wealth, and distribute it among everyone else to make it more equal. And so he just wanted to give everybody really a chance. He wanted to reform their education system and all that. So he was a good guy. But there's a lot of things that happened during that time in Mexican history. There was a civil war, the French invaded, and so he was in and out of power, and eventually out of power. And then the next guy, late 1860s, was Porfirio Diaz, which you see pictured in the black and white photo there with all the medals because he's awesome. But he took over, and he was reelected every election, but it was obviously rigged. He got like 99% of the vote. So he's in control for about 40 years and highly corrupt. He was kind of like Mexico's Stalin. So if you supported him, he would reward you with money and land and things like that. If you went against him, you died. He would take away your land. He would kill your family. He would exile you to Texas. He was harsh. I mean, his policy was bread or the stick. You support me, you get bread. You go against me, you get the stick. And so, of course, during this time, the peasants, your average people in Mexico, are not going to be doing well. You did see a lot of industrialization, so that's one good thing Porfirio Diaz did. You see more industrialization, building of the railroads, more factories, but all the wealth is staying at the top Nothing is being distributed down to the ones that are really working their butts off. And so, of course, this kind of setup always leads to revolution. I've mentioned it before. When you have this huge inequality of wealth, and you got a few rich people that control everything, it's going to lead to a revolution. So in 1910, you get the beginning of the Mexican Revolution, and they had leaders such as Pancho Villa, Carranza, many others, Obregón. But this revolution was an incredibly bloody revolution. There was a lot of different groups as far as different ideas and what should be done in Mexico. So it's kind of similar to the French Revolution, which we'll talk about when we get to Europe, but just incredibly bloody. No real strong leadership. No, it wasn't like one person that really came up to the top and led it. And so, over 1 million people were killed in the Mexican Revolution. One good thing that came out of it is their Constitution of 1917. You do need to know that's the Constitution they use today. But still, during that time, presidents were assassinated. They would leave office. So you're getting one leader after another in the midst of all this violence. And different revolutionaries are being killed, like Pancho Villa, who was in northern Mexico, in Chihuahua. He was assassinated in the 1920s, but still. The point is that it was an incredibly violent time. There really was no stable time in Mexico during the 1800s or early 1900s. One good thing, also another good thing, I guess you could say, came out of this is the new land redistribution that came out. So fast forward 1929, you get a new political party called the PRI, the Institutional Revolutionary Party. And so you get more land redistribution. It looked good at first, but the problem is they don't tolerate opposition. Highlight that. That's huge. And so really what I want you to see out of this is that even though you may have the appearance of democracy, you have political parties, you have elections and stuff like that, it doesn't mean that you have a true democracy. I mean, when you don't tolerate opposition and the elections are rigged, then clearly it's not truly a democracy. And so the PRI party ruled until the year 2000. So think of this, the rule of the PRI party from 29 to 2000 is like a dictatorship of a political party. So it's not just one person, but it's just a particular political party that rules, and whatever they want done gets done. So you can imagine the amount of corruption that can come out of this. And hopefully you can see just in this short little bit of why Mexico is so screwed up and why they have so many problems. And it has to do with this volatile history and the lack of true democracy and the lack of stabilization in their government. So year 2000, a different political party, the National Action Party, had their candidate elected, Vicente Fox. And then in 2006, Felipe Calderón was elected as well right there. That's Vicente Fox up there. So now you're starting to see kind of democracy take root. And it was Felipe Calderón that really went against the drug wars, and so like all the cartels and stuff like that. And that's when you start seeing the violence in Mexico pick up against the drug cartels. But it's because actually the government's standing up and doing something about it. There's still a lot of corruption. There's still tons of issues in Mexico. But obviously I want you to get an idea of what's going on from their history there and how that set that up. All right, and so looking at it today as far as culture and things that are going on economically. So mestizo, you got to know that word and highlight it right there. Mestizo population. Mestizo, again, is a mixture of Native American and European blood, obviously Spanish blood. So it's a mixture of Native American and Spanish blood. So about 90% of all Mexicans are mestizo. They still have a huge gap between rich and poor like they had in the early 1900s. So you still have a few very rich people. In fact, one of the richest persons on earth right now is a Mexican, just multi-billionaire up there with Bill Gates. And so their biggest challenge right now is building an industrial economy. So right now they're industrializing. They're what we would call a second world country. So you're seeing a lot of factories, people working in factories, stuff like that. You're seeing a lot of people moving to urban areas to get jobs in those factories and kind of leaving the agrarian society behind. So they're shifting towards an industrialized country. One of the biggest parts of their economy is oil, especially in northern Mexico. That's made some cities in northern Mexico very rich, like Monterrey and Chihuahua. If you go to those cities, they look very American because of the wealth there. But again, it's concentrated in just a few wealthy people. And then we've already talked about the maquiladoras, the factories. A lot of these are along the border. That's where they bring Mexicans from across the border to work in a factory in the United States and then take them back to Mexico after work. And so that way they're able to get better jobs. We've also talked about NAFTA, of course, highlighted, if you don't remember, North American Free Trade Agreement. and that was set up, as free trade with Mexico and Canada and the United States. And that was to really try to help their economy boom. And the maquiladoras have really taken off since NAFTA was introduced. And so we see more of these factories. And some of these are now in Mexico because they don't have to be in the U.S. anymore. So some are even in Mexico City. And then, of course, we've reduced tariffs and things like that when it comes to trading with Mexico. All right, immigration. So obviously, a lot of immigrants come from Mexico. And by the way, this is a picture over here of Mexico City. So you can see there are very modern, nice parts of Mexico. It's not all slums by any means. But there's a lot of Mexican workers that come here to work. Of course, a lot of them come legally and some come illegally. But the point is they're looking for better jobs. They're looking for more money to be able to support their families. So their families are usually separated. You need to understand that big aspect there because that's huge. That's a problem in Mexico because you're getting the separation of the families. You're getting this breakdown of the family. And if you remember back when we talked about culture, family is the central part of culture. That's where, you learn about how to be as a person really is from your family. And so when families are separated, it causes a breakdown there and can cause issues. Statistically speaking, when you look at families where there's an absentee father or mother, and you have a single parent, there is a higher risk of kids dropping out of school and turning to crime and things of that sort. So it is something to worry about. And so the families usually stay in Mexico while the man goes to the United States and works and sends money back. And it's billions of dollars that comes back across the border. Now, that does help the Mexican economy. And so that's one reason why the Mexican government may not be too quick to stop illegal immigration because, they're getting money back in their economy for it. Obviously, people are going to be spending it. And so it helps boom their economy some. And then, of course, you got a growing population. There's one reason why they're immigrating is you got this huge growing population, and it's a very young population in Mexico. And so you have a shortage of jobs. And so you go to the cities, there's not enough jobs there. So really, your only next option is go to the United States because there's just not enough going on there yet to employ everyone there. And then, of course, the next problem with that is the skills are low because their education system is not great at all. It's got a lot of issues. And so it's getting better, but it's going to take a long time. And so, think about it this way. You got this huge population, but they're all low-skilled workers. There's only certain things they can do. So they're all competing against each other. Whereas then if some of these people could be heart surgeons and engineers and architects and things like that, it would at least create enough stratification, enough different groups of people to where you wouldn't have to compete for these jobs and there'd be more jobs available. But since they're all low-skilled workers, lack of education, then it creates more competition at that low level for jobs. All right, and this is just a map showing where the different maquiladoras are and how much they employ. So you can see most are along the border up here, and then some in the interior of Mexico, like in Chihuahua. And then I'm picking with the cities I can say, kind of Querétaro, which is a very rich city as well, Guadalajara, things like that. All right, and then, of course, other problems they're dealing with. Urbanization, as I mentioned before, they got a lot of people moving into the cities, taking up a lot of space. This is going to lead to a lot of traffic problems. Mexico City, I've been there a couple of times now, has horrible traffic. It takes forever to get around anywhere. And so, their urban sprawl is at its worst here. They spread out everywhere. As you can see here, you don't see any tall buildings. They're just sprawling out everywhere. And so this is going to lead to a lack of water and electricity, especially in these far-off areas near the edges. Because a lot of these areas are what we call the barrios, which is, dirt roads. They don't have connection to infrastructure. They're just kind of building out. Even the city's not even planning a lot of this stuff. It's just people moving in and just kind of building stuff on their own in the city, which, that would never happen here. But it does happen there. And then they do have public transportation. So here again, just looking at this picture, see how small these buildings are, how spread out it is. So like I said, huge urban sprawl. They got the Metro Mexico City, carries 3.5 million people a day, but keep in mind there are about 22 million people in Mexico City. So that's just over 10% of the population that's riding the Metro. And so you still got, about 88% that are driving cars. Or at least 88% of the population that could drive cars. Of course, not all of them have cars, but still, traffic problems are going to be horrendous. Now, you do have parts of Mexico City that, of course, are incredibly nice. So this is where the richer people live. So notice taller buildings, condos, and stuff like that in here, high-rise condos. There's greenery throughout, areas where you can walk with some water running through there. That looks vastly different than that. So this is majority of Mexico City, poor housing. The nice part, you can see the difference in the way people live. This is Mexico City at night from a hilltop. So again, you can just see just the sprawling mass of people. It's like a giant anthill. And then here's the slums, and I mean, this picture, it's hard to even know what to focus on. It's so clumped together. You see a couple of trees. You can kind of pick out where the roads are. You can tell they don't necessarily make sense. It's not laid out in a certain way. These buildings are very poorly made. They can just collapse on them and kill them. And so there's huge problems that can arise from that. And so, I guess they paint different color buildings so that we can kind of pick it out. Like I live in the yellow one, even though there's a couple of yellow ones. All right, so go ahead and answer these questions. What language and religion are dominant in Mexico and why? Make a list of the key issues Mexicans face. Rank the problems most critical to least critical. So this one should be pretty easy. This one, I want you to list, try to get to at least 7 problems, 7 to 10 problems. Some of them we've talked about right in here. You can look up the rest online. But make a list of problems. I want you to rank them from most critical to least critical. And then I want you to write a short, about half page, quick write, explaining why you ordered it that way. Like, why do you think the one you picked as number 1 is the most critical issue to Mexico and what they're facing? Now, when you think about this, also think about the long-term and short-term effects of that particular problem. So whether you're looking at lack of education, pollution, urbanization, things of that sort. So think about, what affects them the most. Which one, if they fixed, would fix their government, fix their country the most in the long run, and have the biggest effect. And so you kind of have to think of what problems are related to others, like how is crime related to education, which one would solve the other, that kind of thing. So go ahead and do that. At this point, you can pause the video, do that, and then once you're done with that, go ahead and push play again and finish the rest of the notes. And we're going to talk about the Caribbean. All right, so if you're at this point, you should have done the assignment on the previous slide up there. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, rewind a little bit and pause it, and you'll see what it is you need to answer and do. So make sure you get that done. That will be due today, being Wednesday. So today's Wednesday. It should be when you're watching this. So make sure that gets done and you turn it into the sub. All right, so the Caribbean. This one should be pretty short. The Caribbean, awesome place to go on vacation. But when we talk about the Caribbean, this is the area we're talking about. So you got the big islands, which we call the Greater Antilles, and then the smaller islands over here, which we call the Lesser Antilles. So as far as like a map quiz and stuff like that, you need to know the big ones. Don't worry about the little ones. I'm not going to quiz you on that, just the bigger ones. And then, of course, the Bahamas are right up here off the coast of Florida. All right, so brief history and culture of this area. So 15 to 1800s, of course, Europeans show up and they make colonies out of this area. So remember, colonies is like when England comes in, takes over an area like Jamaica, and they take the raw materials from that country and bring it back to England and make finished products out of it and then sell it back to the Jamaicans. So out of Jamaica, for example, they got coffee and sugar, a lot of sugar cane. So at first, they used the local people to work and to, basically enslave them to work. But you notice down here, again, the natives died from diseases and mistreatment and stuff like that. So what they did, this is when African slave trade picks up. They're like, well, Africans have been exposed to European diseases, so we can just enslave them, bring them over, and have them work. And so the Caribbean received a lot of African slaves. Now keep in mind, and we'll talk about this when we get to Africa, but keep in mind it was the African leaders that were actually selling their own people. So it's not like the Europeans went into Africa and just captured people. It was Africans capturing other Africans and selling them. So they were brought over and started working in the Caribbean. And so this is why you get such a cool mixture of cultures in the region. You got the European cultures. And I mean, all throughout the Caribbean, you had French controlled some areas, the British controlled some areas, the Spanish. And so you got those three mixing, along with the Dutch as well. And then you have the native tribes that were in there. And then, of course, the African groups that came in. And so all those cultures have mixed together to create great food, unique languages. Like when you go to Jamaica, if you've been there, they got a pretty cool dialect. For example, if you're going to say like everything's all right, they're going to say everything's Irie. It's Irie. That means all right. And so they kind of have their own twist of their own language based on these cultures mixing together. So now they're mainly based on exporting goods, just basic raw materials like sugar. They're generally poor. And then religions, you see a mixture again because of all these cultures. So you're going to see Catholic coming from Spain, Protestant Christianity, and what that means is like, Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian, Church of England, things like that. So the Protestants are going to be in places where you saw the English control, like Jamaica. And then you have mixtures of native religions, the Christian religion and things of that to come up with these other ones like Santeria, Voodoo, and Rastafarianism. If you don't know what voodoo is, just think of kind of like the voodoo doll. You got witch doctors and things like that. And it's very popular in that region. It's not like a few people believe that. A lot of people. There's entire countries that are very involved in the voodoo religion. And then Rastafarianism, I think Bob Marley, basically, on that. And I'll give you an idea of Rastafarianism. All right, so as far as the Caribbean as a whole, and of course this is going to vary from country to country, but generally speaking, it's a higher standard of living. 95% literacy rates, so the education system's not bad. Basic health care is not bad. Most women are giving birth in hospitals, which means it's becoming more advanced. Not giving birth on the field anymore. Infant mortality rates are low, and so again, we know their health care is doing better. Life expectancy is around 70 years old, so they eat pretty healthy, are active. And family is super important. They're super involved in their community and family, and that's where they really see the importance of everything. So they're more concerned about your family and relationships than they are working and making tons of money. Now, of course, there are certain countries that are incredibly poor, like Haiti, and we'll get to that in a little bit. All right, and so Cuba, we'll just hit a few of the countries in the region. Cuba, as you know, or should know, it's communist. It's off the coast of Florida. You can see the tip of Florida there. There's the Florida Keys, so it's about 90 miles from Florida. And Fidel Castro took over in 1959 and set up a communist government. It was supported by the Soviet Union while they were in power. We've had strained relations with Cuba ever since, and a lot of distrust between the countries. But since, really the past 20, 30 years, we've seen a lot of improvements. Life expectancy has gone up there. Literacy rates have gone up. Infant mortality has dropped. And just of recently, we're starting to try to normalize relations with Cuba. So here pretty soon, hopefully it'll be easier for you to travel to Cuba because it's an absolutely beautiful country, an awesome culture, amazing food, awesome beaches. If this was open for us to travel to easily, this would be a huge tourist hotspot for Americans. So hopefully it'll start going that route. And of course, the more important thing is that it's going to create a better livelihood for the people in Cuba if we begin trading with them and having normal relations with them. So on the bad side of Cuba, though, you got, of course, they're politically repressive, and so you got leadership that gels people, that goes against them and stuff like that. Now, they, of course, are not as extreme as North Korea or anything like that whatsoever. Since the Soviet Union fell in 1991, they've really kind of softened. But like I say here, this bullet point, we're changing now, basically. So our Cold War terms with Cuba is changing. We're starting to open up with them, hopefully begin trading with them, and make it easier to travel there. So this will begin to change. All right, Puerto Rico. If you didn't know, Puerto Rico is part of the United States. So the people that live there are U.S. citizens. They get social benefits of being a citizen, retirement, health care, all that, welfare. But they don't get to vote. And so they don't have to deal with some taxes when it comes to, the income tax. Now, they pay local taxes in Puerto Rico. But they don't really have to worry about taxes to the United States. But they're part of the U.S. They're not a state yet. They voted to become a state, but it hasn't been approved. Most likely it won't be because their standard of living is quite lower. And so, it would be kind of hard for our economy to just bring them in all of a sudden. All right, Haiti. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. So in the Americas, this is by far the poorest country, got the most problems. This was a former French colony. They fought for independence in the early 1800s under the leadership of Toussaint Louverture. Don't know if that's how you say it, but that's how I'm going to say it. So, but Napoleon just gave up on it because he didn't really care for it to try to keep it because he was trying to take over Europe. So at the time when it was part of the French Empire, it was the richest plantation economy in the West. And now it has the poorest economy. And the reason why, you need to know, it's right there. Incompetent authoritarian government. So, again, leadership that pretty much has all the power. They suck all the money away from everyone else, and the people live in places like this instead. So illiteracy is horrible, high infant mortality rate. Just to give you an idea how bad this country is, I can pretty much sum it up like this. I had several friends that went on mission trips to Haiti. I didn't get a chance to go, but I had a lot of friends that went when I was in high school and college. And mothers would be trying to hand over their babies to my friends to bring back to the United States. And not because they didn't want their kids. They wanted their kids. They loved their kids dearly. But they knew that their kid would have a much better life and a much better opportunity in the United States compared to where they were living. So imagine a country where the people are so poor, so have a lack of trust or faith in any kind of future there, that they're willing to give up their own kids to go to another country because they know it'd be a better life for them. If they love their kids that much, they'd be willing to do that. So there's no stat or anything I can give you to show you how bad that country is in suffering, other than just telling you that one thing. Think of a parent that's willing to give up their child so their child can have a better life in another country and never see them again. That country's having problems if the people are willing to do something like that. So they got huge issues. And hopefully they'll improve and the government will improve, but it's a very sad situation. And so this little cartoon shows Haitian refugees coming into the United States, and think of this trying to show like a tidal wave. So if we just allowed all the refugees that want to come from Haiti to save them, the point is it would also bring us and destroy us as well. So it wouldn't help them. So the way to help them isn't just by bringing them over, because that's not going to help. We need to improve their country and their standard of living where they live, and help them out there. And it's going to take longer, but it doesn't solve anything just bringing them here either. All right, then Central America. So Central America is this area between Mexico up here and South America down here. So like Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, all that. So a few quick things here. Soil. That's where the wealth is, meaning that they farm a lot. I mean, you're right in the tropics, so you're going to be able to farm pretty much all the time. A lot of the farming used to be subsistence agriculture. Now it's shifting to more commercial. Infrastructure is always lagged behind in this region. They've had a lot of conflicts and wars and things like that, and bad governments as well. And there's not arable soil everywhere either. Of course, you got the rainforest stretching through here, and like I said, a lot of socialist revolutions, which we've been involved in many of them. And so just now it's starting to prove and get better, but it's taken a while. And then the Panama Canal, you need to know what this is. We had this built in the early 1900s. And of course, it's in Panama. You need to know the reason why we built it. It connects the Caribbean Sea, which is part of the Atlantic, to the Pacific Ocean. So now with shipping, we didn't have to go all the way around the southern tip of South America, which is awesome. So because that was a huge waste of time. So cut shipping time down big time, and we got the Panamese to agree to work on this because we pretty much guaranteed them their freedom. They were part of Colombia at the time. They were fighting a civil war against Colombia. And we told the Panamese, hey, we'll help you in your civil war if you give us a strip of land where we can build a canal. And we'll give you all the weapons and money you need. And so they agreed. We helped them out with their war. They won, got independence. And then they built this canal for us. Thousands of them died from bubonic plague and malaria. But, we got our canal. So I guess it worked out. But we controlled this until 1999. And then we give it back to the Panamese. Now, they've been selling a lot of this land off and a lot of the control of the Panama Canal actually to China. The reason why that's important for us is that if we ever went to war with China, they could attempt to close down this canal, which would block our Navy on the East Coast from being able to get to the West Coast quickly, which is, of course, where the Chinese would be. So just know the basic idea of the canal. So that's it for this presentation. So, again, this you should have all watched on Wednesday. Make sure you do that work. Back up here, let's see. These questions, make that list, do that quick write. The sub needs to get that today. And you should have plenty of time because I know how long this presentation took to record, and I know you have about an hour left of class if you watch this straight through. All right, so have a great Wednesday.